minimum wage increase will be. So what reprieve can everybody expect next year amid rising prices? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. And welcome to this weekend edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. Joining us online, Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star from Manila and Regina Lay, One News Business Editor. Ladies, happy weekend.
Happy weekend.
Happy weekend, guys.
Yeah, I always love saying that. But anyway, let's...
Weekend na talaga for
finally. So we have 3 days until Monday. Okay, what's your big story today, Ami?
Well, wala na si President Marcos as chair of the Maharlika Fund, pero sabi ni Benjok, hindi pa raw fully out yung SSS and GSIS as possible sources of funding. Hindi pa rin daw yun i-approve ng board ng SSS and GSIS.
But the difference could be, of course, depending on the final version of the bill, the difference could be na hindi na sila kailangang i-compel na mag-contribute.
Pwede pa nga, di ba? Sabi, kung yung board gusto, pwede pa rin.
Baka ipilit, gano'n. Kung gusto nila ipilit, kung talagang persistent sila.
Speaking of pilit, I just wanted to point out how fast this proposal came about and how fast they were to change things, thereby proving that if there is a will, there's a way. Kasi when we started this week, Monday, ibang-iba pa yung proposal, and then suddenly Friday, 5 days later, we have changes, right? After public outcry.
Yeah, surprising, yung feedback, ang bilis. At ang bilis ng response sa feedback.
Kaya pala gumalaw ng mabilis is my point.
Which is quite unusual. It's a breath of fresh December air.
Yeah, I know. To think December pa, usually things kind of slow down at this point in time,
because
right?
Everybody's getting ready to move to, especially congressmen, to move to out of town, go back to their constituents and celebrate December.
Putin nila bago mag-recess.
Oh, ayun lang, di ba? There's exactly a week left before they go into recess. So then we will see kung talagang mapipilit nila in the next 5 days, the next 5 weekdays.
Sobrang bilis naman yan. Di ba ang tawag dyan, railroading na yan?
Hindi daw, yun na nga, we've asked that a few times, pero they said it's not being railroaded, so okay. Priority bill daw, kasi iba talaga pag priority bill.
Malacanang has been silent pa. Kung priority yan.
Yeah.
Diba kailangan niya ng certification, di ba?
Yes. If you want to have on the same day second and third reading, that needs certification from the palace.
Correct.
Punta pa siya ng Senate
Yeah, iba pa yun. Ibang usapan pa yun. Diba? Although, of course, what we did hear from the start was that this was also the president's idea.
According to the economic manager.
Yes.
Diba? May sinabi na ba si Presidente mismo? Wala pa naman.
Yeah, yun nga parang mystery pa rin yun because we also heard the president's sister talk about it. Then,
yes, precisely on the pension fund.
And she had a different opinion. Yeah. Anyway, so much to talk about tonight. It's a Friday, but there's so much to talk about. And we will talk about that, among other things, but we will also talk about the economy in general. So we will just take a break, and after that, we will come back with our first guest for tonight. So please stay with us. Prices of commodities are soaring, but workers' salaries are not keeping up. On the other hand, business owners are still recovering from pandemic losses. Can the two sectors meet halfway? And joining us tonight, Sergio Ortiz-Luis, the President of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, or ECOP. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi sa inyo at sa ating mga tagapanood.
Yes,
Good evening, sir.
Thank you for joining us. It's a weekend. I know you'd probably prefer to be going out and painting the town red like we probably would want to. But anyway, sir, let's talk about the economic climate first. Inflation rates really high up. Gas prices still up. At the same time, ERC, Meralco has already announced may increase doon sa power rates and possibly another round coming in by January because of the SPPC deal. How does it look for business so far?
Well, I think we are going well. It's slowly but surely. It's not in the pace that you would like to develop, but certainly we are moving forward. I think even the World Bank is saying that there might be a danger that we'll be in recession next year. I don't think that is probable. It's always a possibility, but I think we're doing fairly well considering the situation.
Sir, so yung sinabi ng World Bank President, fears of recession worldwide by next year, that does not faze you?
I think we will survive that. I don't think the showing is there's not much disruption in our supply chain that's going to happen. Our even exchange rate is stabilizing. The prices of fuel has been going down, and I think we are able to contain some of the prices of our prime commodities. There's too much talk about 8% inflation. Some time ago, we had a study done when we were having that inflation during the crisis, and former late Secretary Dondon Padiranga of NEDA and BSP who did it, and they came up to the result that 5%, 4%, 5% inflation in the kind of our economy is quite okay, and even 8% is manageable. The only problem with 8% is everybody is now a inflation watcher. But basically, our inflation basket are different. The ordinary people should only look at basically two things that should concern them: the cost of their transportation and the cost of their food. If cost of food is stabilizing and transportation is not moving upwards, why do they have to worry about the price of fuel? That is the problem of some of the factories, some of the but it certainly is not 8% to them. It's just a number, but everybody's becoming conscious of this number, and they get frightened whenever it increases. But the fact remains that ilan lang naman yung items that affects them in that inflation basket.
Well, on the part of the employers, there are looming this coming year. There are looming increases in premiums for SSS, no? And the workers are asking for a wage increase. Anong stand do ng Employers Confederation?
Well, in the case of the increases in SSS, GSIS, or whatever, or Philhealth, the other year when this thing came up, we requested all of them to postpone it because of the situation of the pandemic. Pag-ibig readily agreed to postpone it, and in implementing it, they even cut it to one half. Parang staggered. Yung Philhealth, we didn't want. They were in the middle of a lot of controversy, so we don't even know what happened. SSS said they can't do anything but implement it because it's the law. So we went to Congress and we requested that they give the president a mandate to be able to intervene and the Congress did it. They gave. Unfortunately, the last administration did not use that mandate. We hope that maybe President Marcos might look at it again and see whether, even if this is small to item, any 1 peso increase, especially to the small micro industries and the workers, they can feel, and they put together, they become for investors also. After all, we're talking about Maharlika. If they can even look at the SSS to contribute billions to the Maharlika Fund, why not just delay this little increase in deductions?
What about yung wage increase? Kakayanin kasi sabi ng workers sige, babagal ang demand if you don't increase our wages. Is that, or will it lead to layoffs or further layoffs, I mean, considering what's been happening in the labor sector?
Which one is the increase? The increase?
Yes, in wages naman.
I think it's a very small part, especially per company, of their cost to be able to implement to affect losses of job. I don't think that is at all. It's just that for the small ones, they can feel that. Something increase, they will feel that already. So better in the midst of all these things that's going on, why not postpone it a little? To think about it.
Sir, if I may, I'd like to disagree with your statement about 8% inflation being manageable, no? Because we know that it's, for the average Filipino, masakit na yon. Especially given we're at Christmas time, people are spending for Noche Buena and so on and so forth. And actually 8% is just an average, because when you look at the food basket, 10% plus na yung inflation, right? So following up on Ami's question, I just wanted to ask, are you saying for ECOP members at least that you're willing to increase wages by next year?
Well,
Tama ba yung understanding ko?
You know, our ECOP members are mostly in the upper side of the small companies, medium and large. No? Yung mga micros are not our members. They're part of our... But the thing is, unfortunately, 90% of employment, 90% of enterprises are micro, and 65% of employments are coming from the sector. So this sector, 50% of them closed down during the pandemic. Some are struggling to open now. The others are deciding not to open and still watch. No? So that is why we are saying that yung mga cost na dumadating can be a turn-off for many of them. And in relation to the salary, it's nice to say that if you increase the minimum wage, you help the workers. But the affected sector of the wages of the DOLE, Pag-ibig, SSS, are only the formal sector. As against the informal sector. The formal sector is only 16% of the 50 million in the work market, in the employment market, no? And 16% at hindi lahat yun minimum wage earner. No? If you, I think 2/3 of them are minimum wage earner. If you make across the board, including everyone, kasama yung manager, kasama yung general manager, kasama yung presidente, that will be 16%. No? But technically, minimum wage earner is only 10% of the labor sector. So who are the other not benefited by these increases? All sorts of drivers, jeepney drivers, tricycle drivers, market vendors, agricultural workers, small business, family business, also 84% sila.
Right.
So when you increase the wages, the minimum wage, how does it affect the tricycle driver? Wala naman siya employer na magtataas ng sweldo niya. How does it affect the farm worker? Wala naman magtatagdag ng minimum wage sa kanya. So 10% ang nabebenefitan. And what do the employers do? The big companies, sabi nga, 90% is micro, a little over 8% is the small, 1% is the medium, less than 1% is the large. So what will they do? The big ones, they will just absorb it. That's fine. And as a matter of fact, I think they're showing pretty good profits even now. But the micro, sometimes even their weekly or monthly payroll, they can hardly meet. And they're already complaining. They're not fully calling back all their employees. And some of them are not even opening up yet. So, but the workers that will benefit the minimum wage are the ones really who are basically well off than the rest of the 90%, because regular workers sila may minimum wage. So if the company, if they because mandated wages increase, has nothing to do with your profitability nor your sales. So what do? If they cannot afford it, they will either lay off some people, or they will pass it on to the buyers, increase the price. Unfortunately, the 90% will have to pay that price. That is the thing. That is why whenever it goes to the regional wage board, it's not the perfect way to do it. No, but it's better than doing it emotionally or politically, because in the wage board, the government, NEDA, DTI, DOLE are represented.
Right.
And the employer and the employee are represented. So they really talk about it realistically. No emotions, and let's look at it. And it always that expectation is raised by all these requests for increases. But the reality dawns on them when pinag-usapan who will be benefited, what will be the effect to the rest of the economy. That is why those requests hardly will gain any positive from the wage board.
Abol ko lang, President Marcos is calling on business owners to step up efforts to generate jobs. Is this possible at this time? And what might you need, for example, from the government to make this objective attainable?
Last year, our group, ECO, PCCI, Philexport, the BPOs group, the manufacturing sector, the contractors, we signed an agreement with the DOLE, DTI, NEDA, to create 1 million jobs. It's not jobs that recalling those who were laid off during the pandemic. These are incremental jobs. And so it got delayed because last year, because August, we heightened our alert again. So we met the 1 million jobs, which was being monitored carefully by DOLE last March. And last May, during the Labor Day, there were other people, other groups who joined. We again pledged to create another 1 million jobs. I have not monitored how it is going as of this now, but that is how the private sector is doing. Private sector will create jobs. It's business. So the large one, if they need it, they will create jobs. But the small ones, you cannot squeeze blood out of the stone sometimes. Even the 13-month pay is a problem to them. But the government is doing it right. They're focusing on the low-hanging fruits to create jobs. They're going. The president is going out of the country and try to attract investment. And those investments will really create jobs. And I think that is why the percentage of unemployed is low now. But don't get deceived. The percentage being low doesn't mean that there are less unemployed people. There are 800,000 to 1 million entrants to the new market every year. Those who graduate, those who come of age, no? Hindi sila masyado na-hire. So yung 4.5% does not mean that na-hire sila. That means that a 4.5% on 40 million workers is not the same as 4.5% in 50 million with 50 million workers. Mas malaki in terms of numbers. Mas malaki yung 4.5% doon sa mga ano. And you know, the way we get statistics is if you work for one day, you're considered employed. Even one day. Although unemployed. If you are not actively looking for a job, you're not considered unemployed. That's the irony of those statistics.
Okay. Mr. Sergio Ortiz-Luis, President of the ECOP, Employers Confederation of the Philippines. Sir, maraming salamat for joining us tonight.
Maraming salamat din sa inyo at sa pagkakataon binigay niyo.
Thank you, sir.
Ingat po. We are starting up another conversation after the breather, so keep it here on One News.
Authors of the measure creating the Maharlika Wealth Fund are proposing further amendments to appease concerns on transparency.
Marikina Representative Stella Kimbo proposed more amendments to the Maharlika Wealth Fund bill. She said the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas shall eventually remit 100% of its dividends to the MWF.
Ang suggestion is until ma-fund yung Maharlika Wealth Fund, yun muna ang puntahan ng mga dividends ng BSP.
Experts call for further revisions in the controversial Maharlika Wealth Fund bill.
I think they should remove the provision that only the board of directors can approve access to the records.
We have a lot of bright people there who are able to spot investments. So if we are awarding projects to all of these conglomerates all over from Manampaya to all of this, and we know that their track record of success is high, then why not be part of it, even for just 10 or 20%? So that's the idea that I think is worth looking into.
The bill creating the Maharlika Wealth Fund still does not have a final version as we speak. But politics aside, is it really a good investment? Let's welcome a real expert on this topic. Thanks for talking to us, international investment banker Mr. Stephen CuUnjieng. Sir, welcome to the Chiefs and thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much. It's my first time to be on the show, so I hope I'm worthy of your invitation.
Grabe naman si Sir. Sir, we hope to have you again. Actually, we hope to have you more often. But sir, let me start off with this. You have experience in this matter. I think I understand you've also dealt with, for example, was it CIG of Singapore? GIC of Singapore.
GIC.
Yeah, yes, sir.
I've done 5 deals with GIC.
GIC.
And I'm very proud that they were for 3 different companies, and all three won Deal of the Year.
There you go. Well, sir, so you do have the experience, and you are the right person to talk to about this. But as well, in your interviews before, you've also called for more prudence and more care. In fact, you do sound very, very cautious as far as making decisions on this matter is concerned, to Maharlika Wealth Fund. Pero sir, I'm sure you've also heard that they've done some amendments, or they're doing some amendments to the bill. Among them, hindi na po yung Pangulo yung chairman. It will be the Finance Secretary, additional private sector members to the board of directors. I think 4 or 5 SSS and GSIS will no longer be compelled to produce funds for the fund. But BSP will have to fork over its profits. Anong tingin, sir? Is this cautious enough? Is it already on the level of prudence, or medyo ano pa rin? The risk is still high.
Let me, rather than react to
Yes, sir.
what seems to be people trying to get this to be palatable, I think we should look back. And first, why are we doing this in a ready, fire, aim manner?
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to do something as important and substantial as this, and I'm not against it, by the way, I think they're rich, poor, in between countries, many do it.
Certainly,
But
yes, sir.
let's understand first, what is the purpose? Because if you listen to 3 different people who are influential in this, they have 3 different overviews. The president says, I want the development fund to spur economic development.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the bill as previously filed, it's a global fund where they will make international investments so they won't lose money, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
So one is a development fund. The people filing the bill in Congress seem to want to create a global
Investment fund.
global asset management fund. And then if you listen to Senator Marcos, she's saying if we are using retirement money, and now they've taken that out because of what she said, which was frankly correct, we should not put retirement money at risk. A pension fund, which is the precursor to many of these funds, are basically yield and return is secondary. Safety is primary, because you're not trying to create the best performing fund. You're trying to ensure the viability of a retirement package and its actuarial standards. So first, what are we doing? Which of the 3? Are we doing a development fund? Are we enhancing retirement returns? Or are we trying to create a global investment company? They require different skills. They apply for different needs. And so I'm not worried. Prudence, management, controls, principles are all critical. But it is the second decision. The first decision is, what are you trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. Now, I think what is appropriate for us at the stage we're going to try to do something is a development fund. Now, let's also understand what we are talking about rather than look at what is the popular name or anything. Like, for example, people say Temasek. Temasek is actually not a sovereign wealth fund.
Yes, sir.
It is more like what would have been NDC. It started out with the assets, corporate assets, the government owned or inherited. And Temasek was told, create value, enhance value, and develop this further. And they developed them, most successfully, some not as successfully, because that's what happens when you have several assets. Not all of them will do well. And then when they became more successful and bigger, they used the profits to make it bigger. And when they needed more money, they borrowed money. They went to bonds. So they never used one of the 3 traditional routes to a pension or sovereign wealth fund. Mm-hmm. One are pensions. The other are windfall profits, like that come from
oil or gas,
resource rich, something like that. And the third, and even like Nauru, from its minerals. And the third would be surplus from reserves. Now, we also have to be a little careful about reserves. All countries have reserves. The question are the reserves from surpluses or the reserves because you borrowed the money to build up your reserves? We have not explained what type of reserves we are, because like the government and the central bank borrow money to fund things and to build up the reserves so that we can fund our export, imports, and so on. Now, so reserves that come from borrowing are not free. They cost money.
Yeah.
Reserves from surpluses and balance of payments are a different story. So first you have to look at all of those and decide with that what do you want to do. The second thing is when we look at what would be the equivalent of sovereign wealth funds like the GIC or CIC in China or the Norway Oil Fund or in Malaysia, Khazanah and EPF. EPF is Employee Provident Fund, obviously retirement money, pension money. Most of them started out, like Temasek started in 1971, GIC in 1981 or 82, I can't remember the exact year. Are we looking to create something circa when they started, where they are today, or something in between? Because Temasek and GIC had 50 and 40 years to find their way and grow. So what stage and what complexity are we thinking of doing? Now, the other thing is, there is not a shortage of private equity firms, global and regional, in this space. I don't wish to talk my book because I'm a senior advisor to this company. PAG is reputedly the largest private equity firm that only invests in Asia. They have managed $50 billion. Okay? Now, the global ones, KKR, everything, Carlyle, they manage trillions in private equity. Now, you can say we're not really being private, because private equity means you invest in unlisted companies with the hope to exit them through a sale or a listing. Development fund can be public, not public, but it's focused in home country investments.
Okay.
Private equity is global, regional, wherever you want, or there are single country private equity funds. So there hasn't been, in my view, a proper discussion and vetting of what are we aiming for. Because there are three things that are complementary and contradictory at the same time: a development fund, an asset manager, or basically helping the pension funds make more money. They have different goals, they have different risk parameters, but most important, they have very different expertise. So all of them have safeguards, prudential work, and all that. But what underlies all of them? They have very highly expert teams who are compensated very well on performance to make the investment decisions. If you're making putting all these prudence and safeties in, but you're making the wrong investment decisions because you're not competent or at a level equivalent to the people who will be competing to make the same investments, where are you?
So bali bawal ang 3-in-1.
I mean, they're contradictory goals. I like to eat steak and
Stephen, sorry. This is Regina. Let me just jump in because I think I have the answer to your question, and it's coming from the press release that the economic managers released today after the House, the meeting today, and they said this is going to be a vehicle to move forward the agenda for prosperity and achieve the economic goals of the administration. Ergo, number one in the three options that you enumerated. Development fund, it sounds like they want it to fund big ticket infrastructure and help them achieve the medium-term fiscal framework, 8-point socio-economic agenda, basically.
Finally.
So it sounds like a development fund, right?
Why did the original bill have foreign investments in and asset management? That's my point. It's the ready Normally, before you do a bill, at least, I'm a lapsed lawyer, you go on 3 readings, you do a study, you do hearings, then you do the first. Why are we filing a bill, then changing it, rather than have the proper study and analysis of what the objective is? Then the first bill should not have been filed that way if the objective is development. And there should be much more robust discussion on what that means, what are the parameters. And let me be blunt. If it's a development fund, which I actually believe we need, okay, if it's properly done, there will be losses. You will hope the gains over time will exceed the losses by a sufficient margin. But every private equity firm, every development fund, that's not full hits. We have to educate the public that this is what happens. And we're seeing it as a bit of a magic bullet that will solve things, when it is a painful process that, properly handled, overall leads to success, development, and profit. But it is not a sure thing, and it's not a certainty.
But you're talking about losses. That will contradict what Stella Kimbo said, no? She said they will be investing in high-yield instruments. Pero at the same time, there's another confusion there. They're saying they will not invest overseas, only domestically. What's the investment climate now? If it's high yield, it's also high risk, right? Normally. So what's the investment climate anyway, overseas, right now?
Well, for me, investment climate overseas is like the investment climate here. There are good opportunities and bad opportunities, and it's the intelligence with which you make it and the breadth of what you do, so that the good investments will hopefully outweigh the bad investments. Because I buy stocks, not everyone makes money. Some lose, some make. I hope I make more. But I think if we're listening to what, and I've not met any of them, although I have spoken on the phone once with Representative Kimpo, who I think is a very intelligent and learned person, who I have, a high opinion of in general. I think if we want to do a development fund, then there's frankly no need for international investments. That is an asset manager's job. And frankly, SSS and GSIS can make that already on their own in a prudent mix of how they want to carefully but steadily increase the return from the funds they are managing on behalf of retirees. So again, as I said, there's a bit of confusion on what we want to do. Is this a development fund? Is this an asset manager? Or is this something hybrid in between? Now, I think given the state of where we are, the most important need right now is to spur local development in an intelligent and prudent manner. But I go back to my bigger question, which is, we're talking about processes, but the most important thing is the qualifications and the guidelines for the people who will actually be making the investments. It's not the board who makes the final decision. It's the managers who will be vetting, assessing, and negotiating the terms. Those are the people who really matter in different firms.
There are also concerns about the safeguards. I mean, written the safeguards for transparency, auditing.
No, look, Ami, I agree with all of that. There are standard rules to do that.
Yeah.
But before you deal with the safeguards, it's, are you making the right investments? You can have the right safeguards and pick all the wrong companies and stocks. Nobody's discussing the qualification of the actual team, fund managers, who will make the decisions on which stocks, which companies, which opportunities to pursue, which terms to put them in. And no one's discussing that. And if you look at the successful private equity firms, because this is sounding like a developmental fund in private equity, not in listed companies, because listed companies already have the money they need. They're public, unless there's a new project and you partner with them on the specific project. Now, if it's not, there are teams which are even broken down by industry and geography in these different private equity firms to look at that. Like KKR has a fund that is just infrastructure. They have a fund that is just med tech. They have a fund that is tech. They have a fund that is general industries. So this is the level of expertise and analysis and specialization done to do this. So I think we should narrow the focus. It should be manufacturing and infrastructure and domestically, but that's just my view, all right? Given what is the pressing need. Because let's go back to the genesis and development of GIC and Temasek. They started up making investments in Singapore, either companies that they inherited, which was Temasek, and using the reserves from the balance and payment surplus that GIC was managing. When they got bigger, that's the only time they started going abroad. And after Singapore had reached a level of prosperity. Now, then what did they do? Initially, rather than do it themselves, they invested in asset management companies, their funds, and private equity firms. Then, as they got bigger, they said, we'll still do that, but we'll also start making the direct investments ourselves with our own teams. So what I'm saying is, they took 40 to 50 years to reach the stage they are. And they started domestic first, then investing in the people who know what they're doing. Then after the experience of watching that for about 20 years, then they said, let's continue to do that, but let's start doing it on our own too. So what are we trying to do?
Yes, sir. Sir, if we do aim for a development fund, how should a country like ours fund it? Considering, like you said, be ready to lose or take hits, especially at the outset. How should we fund it? For example, BSP is being listed as one of the primary sources, also DBP and Land Bank.
Well, again, my point is you need a clear purpose. You need qualified fund managers. Never mind the board overseeing it. That's important, that's needed. But before you get to that, you actually need expert fund managers who know what they're doing in their field. You know, people who, like, I'll give you an example. GIC, in the 3 companies that they did 5 deals with, okay? They put, it was each time, it was the private equity side, because they were unlisted, that put the money in. When the 3 companies listed, they sold some of the shares in the IPO, and some they kept. The ones they kept were no longer managed by the private equity side. It was transferred to the public equity side, because the way you analyze and monitor and decide whether to invest in an unlisted company that is not yet public is very different from whether to buy, hold, or sell a listed company. So they even transferred it from that group to another group whose expertise is that. So the answer I'm giving you is a long-winded way of saying it's very complicated. And we should basically say, what do we want to concentrate on? What are the parameters? What are the industries? Let's hire the people, not the board, that's important, and the prudential principles, that's important, but let's hire people who are actually qualified to do this. Or if not, partner with PE firms, private equity firms that know how to do this on a joint basis. Because you need that level of expertise, because you might be taken, frankly, not even for corruption reasons, but just for best practices and competence reasons. If you're doing something off market just because you're not aware of what is going on and how these are being negotiated and priced regionally, you will basically either get very poor, you might give away too much, or you might be giving too little, and then nobody will want to take it because the competing PE firms will offer better terms than you. And if you offer too much better terms, then maybe you'll be investing in bad deals or bad structures. It's a balance, but it starts with the competence of the fund managers and the team doing it. And to get the right fund managers and team, first you have to pay them, but second, you have to be clear what your purpose is.
Yes,
Because
sir.
even these firms don't have a one-size-fits-all fund management team. They already have specialized teams. Like if you want to do infrastructure and you go to one of the global firms, you will not go to the CEO of the firm. Even if you go to the head of Asia, he will pass it on to the infrastructure team. You want to do branded food, they'll give it to the consumer team. You want to do med tech, they'll give it to the pharma and biotech team. So what I'm saying is these are very highly specialized and complex things.
Stephen, the other thing that I wanted to point out about Temasek is that actually they've lost billions and billions of dollars over the years.
No, but they've made more, in fairness.
Yes, they have, but they've also made a lot of mistakes. And I would know because I used to work for Channel News Asia, and we used to cover Temasek a lot.
And they're open about having made
yes,
losses, and
they have.
And they have reversed strategy at times.
Correct.
From the losses, but that's my whole point.
Yeah, but the point as well is that
even the geniuses.
Correct, exactly. Even with the geniuses, even if you pay the best fund manager in the world, it doesn't insulate you from losses because that's just how the market works. But my question to you is, let's assume at this point it's going to be a development fund and that they're going to invest locally. Mm-hmm. Do we have the local expertise to manage it?
Okay, if I don't think, honestly, we don't. All right, number one. Number two, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It means maybe we hire them not to be the sole decision makers, but see, like you can have the people domestically who know the companies, know the markets, know the local play. But then you probably want people who have the direct expertise in negotiating, structuring, and pricing this, working alongside them. That's what people like Temasek, GIC, Kasana, EPF all did. They combined the two with regard to the fund management and the investment criteria and decision making. And I'm not hearing any of that in the discussion of what's going on. And I think that is the most critical. Like, for example, for public equities, for the longest time, it was Peter Lynch and Fidelity Magellan who was the star. People were putting it because they believed in Peter Lynch and the team that he assembled, that he would outperform the market. It wasn't just, oh, let's do this and then the profits will follow.
If we have weak management skills.
I don't want to say weak, okay? That's unfair. I guess like you cannot expect, if there has not been a plethora of these opportunities domestically, to expect people to instantly have it. This is not something you do or we do, all right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, some of these, let's say, recognized regional fund managers may not have the domestic expertise and may not have the, frankly, agenda that needs to be fulfilled, expertise in doing that. So what a lot of the smarter funds did was to combine them.
Well, what do you say to the suggestions that this is just not the time for the Philippines to embark on this kind of fund?
Well, it's not that it's not the point. It's how do you do it and with who. I would think a narrow focused development fund, specific industries. Obviously, we're not going to put it in real estate. There's enough people there who are well capitalized. But areas that could use it, which is certain key basic manufacturing and infrastructure, would be, in my view, relevant. Mining as well, and value-added mining. Those would be relevant areas. Now, as I said, you combine the two. You get proven fund managers who may not be from here, and you have recognized experts in their field who would be not so much industry experts, but more country experts and people who know that industry combining with the people who know how to structure, fund, and price this. Because if you're, especially infrastructure, you're basically looking for a long-dated return. Now, you're going for infrastructure, you're looking for a low teens return. You're going for manufacturing, you should be going for a 20% IRR. So even the returns you seek vary depending on the industries you are seeking. You expect a higher return, let's say from a tech company, than you would from a toll road. But you don't, that's why you don't have a one size fits all, and you need focused strategies. And given, we should first decide what is our priority area that we want to do. Second, let us then have the right teams to manage it. Not so much. The principles are important, the safeguards are important, the prudential things are important. But first they have to make the right decisions, chase the right opportunities with the right terms and structure. Nobody's discussing that.
Sir, I'm getting so much from you. I'm wondering if any of the committees have invited you.
First of all, I'm 63. I've never been in government. Many people who know me very well say I'm not a very patient person, so I'm not the right person.
No, sir. I mean, at least as a resource person in the committee hearings, I just had a committee hearing.
Look, this is what I'm saying is not rocket science or revelatory. Regina would know. This is just something that has to be threshed out and handled. I'm not basically unveiling a whole new world of different things. I'm just stressing in the balance of the discussion, looking at this comprehensively and holistically, we are not discussing that. And I think that is the most critical. Breadth and purpose, number one, quality of the people, who will be analyzing this, funding this, seeking this, structuring it is number two. Then you overlay the safeguards, who you source it from, who you fund it from. You start out with what you want to do, who you're going to do it with, and how you're going to do it. Then you put the superstructure over it.
Yes, sir. Which is why I was
Any
asking.
issues?
Go ahead.
Any issues you see with Finance Secretary Ben Jokno chairing the board? Any conflict of interest issues that you see?
Well, I mean, again, chairing the board, I'll tell you bluntly, the chairman actually does very little. We're concentrating on the superstructure that basically, like, for example, let's use a very analogous example. The bank's credit committee. In the end, the chairman and the CEO and the board of the bank votes up or down for the loans. Do you think that's the most important part? Or it's the corporate banking and commercial banking people who are doing the assessment, the credit analysis, and then bring it to the board?
But won't he get veto power over the final allocation of the funds?
He does or he doesn't. If he makes a fool of himself, or he's a star, he will receive the criticisms or the rewards. But it's what gets to him. He's not going to be there doing due diligence and negotiating the terms. Nobody's talking about that part. And that's the critical part.
Yeah.
So in the end, who is the super board that gives the final yes or no? It depends on what the quality of what is brought to the board first and the terms. That's why Peter Lynch didn't run Fidelity. He just was the head of the Magellan Fund. And he had a team that did all the analysis for him. And in the private equity firms I deal with and the venture capital firms I deal with, it is the same thing. The actual senior management has a very important role, but they only assess what is given. Who does the initial assessment, the scoping, the marketing, the analysis? That is even more important.
Sir, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but given the discussions, we do hope to have you again very soon for a fuller discussion. And this is not going to end anytime soon anyway. So.
Yes. No, I mean, again, if we're doing something, remember what Malcolm Gladwell said. For you to become an expert at anything, you have to spend 10,000 hours minimum doing it. Whether you're a tennis player, you're a concert pianist, or you're a banker. I think we need to spend not 10,000 hours, but a little more doing the analysis of the components before we decide what the whole is.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. With that, we'd like to say thank you very much to Stephen CuUnjieng, international investment banker. Sir, we hope to have you again very soon.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you po.
Bye.
And that's it for the Chiefs this week. We hope Autos Discussion will keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Regina Lay of One News.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.